Murray Rothbard starts out by saying that there's two things we need to keep in mind. Number one is that protectionism means force and restraint of trade. And two, and he thought this was the key, is what happens to the consumer. That the entire time we look at this, he wants to focus on what happens to the consumer. And I don't, yeah, that would be key for someone whose philosophy could be boiled down as consumerism. Well, he talks about how protectionists like me would like to cripple, exploit, and impose severe losses, not only on foreign consumers, but especially on Americans. And then he talks about wanting to subsidize the few. Okay, and basically that we would have these big businesses, and we would subsidize the corporations and everything else, and that's what we do. Now that may be true for some protectionists. That may be true, but protectionists such as I would not support that. We would sit there and say, yes, we believe that there are various sectors of society, whether it's in America or elsewhere, that deserve protection for the well-being of that particular civilization, for that particular group of people. But that's only external. That's the relation between those outside this boundary and those inside the boundary. When we talk about those inside the boundary, I would have it so that it would be so diversified, each one of these, and we would put measures in place by which these big businesses couldn't get to be big businesses, that we couldn't have these monopolies that go around gobbling up small towns and small businesses owned by entrepreneurs. We're to retain the identity we have now internally, and put up, these restrictions, and then sit there and say these are the things we want to fix. Then yeah, unfortunately that's what it would be like. But I don't want to leave it at that. I don't think that internally everything is fine. I think that internally that needs to be fixed just as much as externally. So, his argument may work against certain people, but most certainly not against distributists. Yeah, he sums everything up in short by saying that inefficient producers are trying to deprive everyone of products that they so desire, so that they will have to turn to these inefficient firms. Well, if by inefficient he simply means people who are his neighbors, and people who produce a good that may be 60 cents more for that good than in another country, and that it's 60 cents more because of various humane things, like, for example, paying somebody a dignified wage where they would actually be able to live, move, have their being, create a family, etc., then yeah, that's what we're trying to do. I don't see any shame in that. I sit there and say, yeah, if by efficient he means to take off the human face, or to put the face of someone who works in absolutely morbid conditions, if that's efficiency, then damn efficiency to hell. That's what it is. Really, damn it to hell. All right. The best way to look at tariffs or import quotas or other protectionist restraints is to forget about political boundaries. Political boundaries of nations may be important for other reasons, but they have no economic meaning whatever. Well, this may be true for him. He presupposes anarchy. And so he wouldn't be presupposing a worldview wherein the state and politics may be distinguished from economics, but not radically separated from economics. So this is nothing more than a statement of faith for him. It's an assertion, not an argument. He's assuming that those reading his stuff would agree with him on the role or non-role of the state or non-existent state. but I disagree with him on it. I think that the state has a function, and my worldview would have it that the state is not completely and radically separated from economics. It can be distinguished from. And the area where it overlaps may be small, but it doesn't mean it's radically separated. He attacks a nationalized minimum wage, and I would agree. I don't support a nationalized minimum wage. I think that there are too many factors that come into play. I don't believe that it all boils down to one person voluntarily signing up for, saying, okay, well, I'll do this work for this. I don't think that in and of itself makes something just. But at the same time, I think that we do need to take into consideration the various factors for the employee and for the employer that would come to play, as well as regional differences in cost of living, etc. And that is, I think, the beauty of the Catholic social teaching, is that it talks about just wage and what is a just wage, what are the requirements, and how it puts a check and a balance on the power of the employee and the power of the employer, and it tries to bring us together in a nice middle place. If tariffs and restraints on trade are good for a country, then why not indeed for a state or a region? Well, the reason why, at least not right now, is because of the Constitution. I mean, that's kind of the way it is. But yeah, I think that if we were to have this hypothetical of all 50 states being different countries, you'd certainly have that. I mean, different states would like to preserve their identity, and if they felt like that was being encroached upon by somebody else, they may very well do that. And I would say that they have the right to do that if it really is the common good for that region or for that state. I think that the government has the right to try to preserve and put in place measures that would preserve what is the common good for the people of that area. So he does the old reductio here, saying, well, if you put tariffs on a country, why not on a state? If not on a state, if on a state, why not on a region or a city or even a home? And there is a degree of protectionism in the home. There is. Not only by what we don't allow in, but by what we mandate and the way we set up a home. I happen to be married with 2 kids, one on the way, and I can tell you right now, we absolutely have rules for this home. There is a notion of the common good. And yes, do I believe that I should just let my children do what they please and try to find things out for themselves? No, I don't hate my children. If I hated my children, I would allow them to do that. But I don't, so I raise them in what I believe to be right. And so, yeah, to a degree we do that. And there are towns that do that say, we don't want certain things in these towns. We don't want that. States do it too. They may say, we don't want gambling, or we don't want this, and they try their best to try to curb it. So yeah, they do have that responsibility. They have that right, and it varies according to where you are. It talks about the market economy being this lattice work throughout the world, and each individual in each region, each country produces what he or it is best at, most relatively efficient in, and exchanges that product for the goods and services of the other. This would sound an awful lot like comparative advantage, but he realizing that comparative advantage would have restricted areas and regions to only making that which they're best at, he had to kind of place a little nuance in there and do the efficiency aspect, the most relatively efficient. Okay, and by relatively efficient, of course, he means dirt cheap labor. That's what he means. I mean, there's no other definition for efficiency. It is dirt cheap stinking labor, is what it is. It's getting things at the lowest price, and no matter what it takes. No matter what. Okay, he talks about when, as far as consumers are concerned, the more dumping that takes place, the better. Yeah, that would be true if consumers weren't also workers. I mean, literally, his entire argument is as if all we are consumers, and that's it. That's all we are. That it doesn't also that's it's kind of like me saying, well, I'm just a man. I'm not also a father. He's seeing everything in one dimension. He's not even looking at the human for the human. As I've said time and time again, they take the human element out of economics. This is exactly what it is. They turn America into a market, and they make citizens into consumers, and that's it. The market and consumption. That's all it is. If he wants to reduce mankind to consumption, then he's right. But thank God, the God he didn't believe in, thank God that we're more than that. And that society is more than that. And that because it's more than that, we can laugh at his folly. And we can be thankful that the vast majority of the world will never allow his foolishness to be realized. Ever.